Cynthia, Sunny mentioned a little while ago her belief about how this is adversely affecting women of color, and I think I saw you nod at that point as well. Did you want to piggyback on that?
Sure. And actually, when we first was talking about this, before I even did like my cursory research concerning about like how it could possibly affect um, women who happen to be part of minority groups, Black women in particular. Um, when you have like, first off, and this is before I even did all that, but even before you think about access, the healthcare system in of itself is poorly set up to assist women that come from minority groups, especially Black women. We still have an issue when it comes to how providers think, Black patients have a threshold of pain versus white patients. We even still have an issue of access to proper medical care in certain, even like African American communities. So access is a big thing, and then also like when you look at wealth share and in these particular communities, it's very small. So sometimes these decisions to even have an abortion has a lot to do with, can I even afford the kid? No matter, even if like you can get like services like welfare or Medicaid or things of that nature, they only go so far. And I'm pretty sure that those who have who have children on this panel know that children are extremely expensive. So when you introducing a bill like this, and you have a disproportionate portion of your population that's within poverty, not even like including like the federal poverty line, just like, people who don't necessarily have historically access resources, things that you need in order for you to be socially viable, it's going to hurt them tremendously. Not even keeping in mind the whole thing, like, Anna from TYT mentioning, or I don't know if it was Anna or I keep on forgetting. I can
Cenk
see his
Uygur
name.
and Cenk Uygur and Anna
Yeah,
Kasparian.
Cenk Uygur. Yes, not even to mention like if you have like, money that's more disposable income, you can go to a plane and go to an out of state facility and have this performed. However, what happens when you don't have like resources like that? What happens when you are not necessarily a person that is adjacent to wealth in any means, and you're needing this procedure? Because even like what Sunny even mentioned previously about I believe that you mentioned previously about like, children possibly being violated, young people being violated, like be it by rape or what have you, incest, what have you. And the law doesn't even consider a woman or a person with a uterus that has been violated by rape or incest. So another thing that you're taking away the person's choice to be able to, utilize a medical procedure to help quell their trauma. I mean, you these people who have actually voted, drafted this bill and voted into law have no consideration for any of these things, and how they can disproportionately affect a community of people who are already marginalized and historically oppressed. And and so yes, this is definitely going to be a law that's going to affect these communities adversely, and and to even have like the justice system, specifically the Supreme Court, to say we're not going to, adjudicate the law right now so that we can review it. We're just going to let it happen willy nilly, and then we'll get to it when we get to it. I'm think about like all the people that's going to be affected until you decide that you're going to get to it. And even if you happen to look at any case that is picked up by the Supreme Court, it still takes months for any type of decision to come down, whether they consider a law unconstitutional or not. So what did they
Yeah.
do? And then,
Yeah, and I think at this point, the way that it is now, since they've refused to rule on the constitutionality of it, basically it's illegal, and then it has to go up through the court system, which takes months and months, years. It's going to be illegal in Texas essentially for years, unless the Supreme Court just decides to step in, which they're not going to do because it's a conservative majority, it looks like. Jenna, Miyu, you work in the medical field. This isn't exactly your area, but you already mentioned, being aware of people coming in for abortions. Do you have any knowledge of what if it's disproportionately people of color, or if it's about 50-50, or if it's mostly, do you have any sense of like the demographics there?
Certainly. I mean, obviously, without even just determining to Black women, and minority groups in general are disproportionately affected, but it's more aggressively so with Black women. And, I don't know the hard statistics or the numbers surrounding that, but knowing the aspects of having this type of decision being removed for a person that has a uterus is detrimental, because they're hit on all other sides before they even make this final choice, because getting an abortion is viewed as the ultimate last extreme choice that a person has to make for their well-being. There's certainly other things that fall before that. You have better protection, better health educated individuals that know how to use contraceptive devices, that receive that appropriate education in school and in public health communities overall. But when you don't have that immediate access, or that go-to, or you are, your learning stems from some religious bias where the understanding is you just don't have sex until you're married, that's damaging, because you're just removing or telling said person to not perform this action, ergo you won't get pregnant. But that's not always the case. That happens. So what do you do when that person is just left with no general understanding or no health education to fall back on? How can they appropriately protect themselves? And then on the other end, after that person is forced to have said child, these politicians don't support them on that side either. They purposely remove, after school programs or food, WIC support, removing that funding, and everything else that follows, and trying to support a child, even with trying to support a child having a child. And, the aspects of understanding how to appropriately utilize contraceptives. Hell, their main attack has always just been to remove Planned Parenthood. But Planned Parenthood and other clinics that perform abortions do so much more than just perform abortions, right? They advise that appropriate education as far as appropriate sexual health. So, I mean, just to take a birth control pill is not just to prevent you from getting pregnant. That helps for a woman to regulate menstrual cycles. It helps regulate your hormones, because, women don't all have the same periods.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna,
right.
But Planned Parenthood, if I'm not mistaken, the vast majority of their resources are devoted to things like that and not abortions, right? It's like a misconception that therefore abortions, very little, and no federal funding ever went to abortions, even from Planned Parenthood, right?
Yeah.
That was just like, that's like when I heard that the whole controversy of Planned Parenthood, I looked a lot of this up, and it seems to me like it's just religious people who don't want women having sex who are not married.
Right. And that touches on something when I was reading an article and kind of, relied on my experience as far as, detecting fetal heartbeats and things like that. So not many people know that when you do initially go in, and this article touched it beautifully, and I recalled this in my own education. When you do go in, when a person goes in to, get the sense of, how the baby's doing, to test for a fetal heartbeat, basically. So that sound that a person hears, and I believe there has been a law in one of the states, one of these backward states, that
Mississippi.
There you go. Forcing women to listen to the heartbeat of their child within them. And then ultimately that emotional response could sway them not to abort, which is bullshit. So what you're hearing is not that embryo's heartbeat, because at that point in time, okay, let's just take the 5-week, demand that they're enforcing this. At 5 weeks, that's not a fetus, that's an embryo. Fetus is just used the wrong and inappropriate way in this law, because when we think of a fetus, you think of a fairly shaped, smaller, super smaller version of Jenna Belk's baby right now. But an embryo, that looks like a mishmash of something you maybe find in a trash can or something, just to give you some kind of vivid idea. So when you're listening to that embryonic response through that ultrasound, that's not a heartbeat. Those electrical activity is giving off the sense of something that's there, but the sound is what the ultrasound is giving off. The sound is the ultrasound, not the actual heartbeat. It's just the electrical activity is causing that ultrasound to make that sound. So the whole purpose or drive for these evangelical conservatives wanting to force women to listen to their baby's heartbeat is wrong. And it's purely out of religious bias.